Going? Whoo! Memorial Day weekend. Hey, I want to welcome you. My name is Brett, and I'm the lead pastor here at New Life Church. And I just want to echo for all of those that have served in the military that give us the freedom to be here today. We are so grateful for you and what you have done and all that that means, that we can stand here today and worship and go, woo! Because we have the freedom that we've been allotted in this country. And so our hope is that we make the most of it. That we come in here on Sundays and that we celebrate, we woo because we're excited to be here. But not just on Sundays, but every day that we have the freedom to celebrate who God is. And so we're in a series right now called True Lies, where we're talking about things that may pull us away from God. And our desire is to be in relationship with Him, and we have things in our lives that naturally distract us, that pull us away from that relationship. And it's not the things that are big and audacious and awesome that we go after. At times it's the small lies, the ones that seem really close to the truth, that distract us from the intent of the author and cause us to see things a little bit differently, that pull us off track. So we've been using this illustration through this series. Is it a 9? Is it a 6? Is it a comma? Is it apostrophe? What is it? Well, you're going to have to come till the end of the series to figure it out. But we've been talking about how, depending on how you look at it, it can be just a little bit different. And yet within it, the author intended it to be something. In our life today, as we look at the world that we live in, it's very easy at times to see things maybe a little bit different than what the author intended. And it can turn the 9 into a 6. Does that make it wrong? Or is that the way that it is? Is that okay? How do we determine that? Well, like I've been saying, we've got to figure out, what did the author intend it to be? Well, we have the book the author wrote for us to know what his intentions are. And so we study that every Sunday. And hopefully you don't just study it on Sunday, but you study it in your own life to understand, what did God want this world to be like? Because we have to figure that out in our lives. So we started with the first lie in this series, the first lie in the Bible, the first lie recorded in history, which was that we could be like God. Adam and Eve in the garden were approached by the serpent. He said, if you eat of this fruit, you will be like God. You will know what God knows. And so they took it and they ate of it. And yes, their eyes were opened, but it also caused separation from God. And so we live in a world today where we can see, we know good and evil, and yet we're separated from God. And so in our desire to go back to God, we've done different things. We believe different lies where we've tried to fill ourselves up because there is something within us that goes, this just isn't the way it was supposed to be. So what is the way? We go after these things to fill that void that God's supposed to be in the middle of. And we find that as we fill our lives with these different things, they come back over and over and over again empty. They're empty. I don't know about you, but I've tried it before. I've experienced it. I've done different things to fill that void where the 9 looked like a 6 and it was exciting, and I went after it and I went, oh, that's not exactly what I expected it to be. And so instead of running to God and believing the truth, I've continued to go after the lie, and I fill myself up over and over and over and over again with things that repeatedly turn up empty. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you've tried to fill that void with something other than God, and you've realized that it's empty. Well, once you get to that place of emptiness and you can't fill that void, oftentimes then we believe the lie we're talking about today. And that lie is this, that I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. This lie permeates our culture. It is everywhere you turn. In fact, it's the essence of advertising. Turn the TV on and advertising tells you what? You are not good enough. Or what you have is not good enough. There's an ad campaign right now that I actually quite enjoy. It's AT&T. Just okay is not okay. If you've seen some of these commercials during the Final Four, there were some really funny ones. What it's telling you is that if you don't have AT&T, you're not okay. That you just have an okay network, and that okay network is something that you need to get rid of because just okay is not okay. So your network, if it's not AT&T, isn't good enough. Advertising does this repeatedly. Whatever it is that you have isn't good enough, so you need the next one, or maybe the thing that you've been buying isn't as good as that other product, or the person that you are isn't as good as you could be if you were to do this instead. Which last week we talked about the you do you culture, where it's you can do whatever you want, however you want, you just do you, which we talked about being balanced with this self-help culture of, well, you actually can't do you because you isn't good enough. You aren't where you need to be, so you need to move forward, so you need to do this instead, which permeates our culture. In 2017, a 7th grader wrote a poem for her class about the idea of not being good enough. And a classmate videotaped it and posted it online, and through the whole video, she talks about all the things in the culture as a 7th grader that had already told her that she wasn't good enough. It's a 6-minute long video as she goes through all these different things that she was told she needed in order to be good enough. At the end of it, she then encourages her classmates to understand, actually, the truth is you are good enough. And she gives every single one of them an A. It was posted online by her classmate. Within a week, it had 10 million views. And she was invited on the Today Show because it hit a chord. Because we live in a world where we're told over and over and over again, we're not good enough. We live in a society that sees this with a number of our mental health issues. Go on psychologytoday.com and do a quick search just with the words good enough. And what you find is in the last 5 years, there have been 59 articles that have been written for Psychology Today that talk about not being good enough. And if you're not good at math like I am, you got to use a calculator, you figure out that's once a month. For the last 5 years, almost 60 articles talking about the fact that we are not good enough. It's also one of the major issues with a huge epidemic in our culture today, and that epidemic is the abuse of prescription drugs. If you read the news at all or you see anything that's going on, there is this issue with prescription drugs in the world we live in today. First of all, we have more prescribed drugs than any other country in the world. We have only 5% of the population in the world, but we have 80% of all prescribed drugs sitting here inside the United States. And last year, they believe that we eclipsed larger amounts of prescription drug abuse than we've ever seen in the history of the world anywhere. In fact, an estimate in the United States is that 54 million people in the US last year used a prescribed drug for a non-medical use, which is the definition of abusing a prescription drug. If you use it for a non-medical use, that's the definition of abusing a prescription drug. 54 million people were estimated last year to have done that, which is 15% of the US population. More people abuse controlled prescribed drugs today than those that use heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamines combined. And what's stunning is what the most currently abused prescription drug is. Can anybody tell me what the number one most abused prescription drug is? Adderall. Adderall is the number one most abused drug. Adderall is a drug used to curb ADHD, but it's also a stimulant. And so what you're seeing in high schools and colleges today is that individuals are using these drugs for non-medical uses. Why? Because they want to perform better than they are right now. They use it so they can do better on tests, so they can stay awake longer. Why? Because they've been told, you're not good enough. Your average, everyday, regular performance is not good enough, so you need to somehow do better. We see that also in the suicide and in the attempted suicide rates in our world today. A study of reasons for why people want to take their life come back to the number one reason being that there was a standard that they were told they must live up to, and they felt like they couldn't. They weren't good enough. It's everywhere you turn. We are told over and over and over again, I am not good enough. So what do we do about it? How do we change that? Well, the self-help books will tell you, well, identify what it is that you feel you're not good enough at. What is the standard you're trying to achieve? What are you trying to accomplish? And maybe if you can identify that, you can change it. So first we got to identify, well, what's the standard? Well, what is the standard? Can anybody tell me what the standard for good enough is? Anybody? Anybody at all? How about perfect? Jesus. That's a really good answer. How about from a worldly perspective? Outside of Jesus, can you tell me in this world what good enough is? How do I become perfect? What's perfection look like? Well, ask any perfectionist, and guess what? The standard changes from one person to the next. For some people, perfection is cleanliness, right? The house has to be just immaculate. It's got to be the way it's supposed to be, and this is the way, and guess what? The way is, it's their way. Go to the next cleanliness perfectionist, and their house is going to be clean a different way. Maybe it's success. I always have to win. Perfection is being the best. Well, what's the best? Do I need to be the fittest? Do I need to be the strongest? Do I need to be the richest? What is perfection when it comes to being the best? Or maybe perfection just means I need to wake up every day and make my bed. Oh, man. I can't meet any of those standards. And so as I try to pinpoint the thing, the standard that I'm not living up to, the standard keeps changing. It's almost impossible. And then take that into a social media world where the standard changes with every new picture that I look at. Maybe that's the standard. Maybe that's what I'm supposed to be. There's this new category of professionals out there in the world today. It's called influencers. Do you know you can be an influencer? You can make money by posting pictures online that create new standards, influences, ways to cause other people to live. Travel to exotic places, post crazy pictures, and you can make lots and lots of money. And what you're really doing is you're telling people that unless you look like me or unless you live this way, you are not good enough. And we believe it. We listen to it. We're engrossed by it. And so, if we can't figure out what the standard is, what's the solution? Well, for many of us, we just tell ourselves then, I'm good enough. I'm good enough. And maybe if I repeat it over and over and over and over again, at some point, I will believe it. If I say it long enough, if I say it loud enough, I will believe that I'm good enough. You know, as a pastor, I deal with this regularly. In a world of social media, in the world of the internet, in a world of likes and views of your videos, it's really easy to get caught up in this, I'm not good enough. I don't dress very fancy. I don't really like wearing fancy stuff. If I could be up here and be me, I'd wear a ratty old t-shirt and shorts. In fact, my wife had to make a blanket a number of years ago of all my ratty old t-shirts because she didn't want me wearing them anymore. And she didn't tell me about it, and she raided my drawer, and she took all these t-shirts from all my sports days and all the things from high school and junior high, and she gave it to me as a gift one day, and I opened it up, and there's all my t-shirts in a blanket. And she's like, surprise, don't you love it? Ah. I love it now. My son actually uses it as the blanket that he sleeps with at night, which is really, really cool. It's turned into something neat, but at the time it was like, ah! Which was her subtle way of saying, you're not good enough. But I get up here and I'm like, oh, what am I going to wear on a Sunday? Do I need to wear something fancy? I need to work out more because there's other pastors out there that are stronger than I am. I need to go tanning because there's some guys that, ooh, man, they got really great complexions. Their sermon series are more creative. Their churches are larger. There's all sorts of things that I could look at and go, you know what? I'm not good enough. Fortunately, there's a solution. Comedian John Crist actually created a video of a solution for pastors like me called Swag Seminary. Take a look.
My name's Doug. I'm a pastor from Oklahoma. I don't know, my sermons and illustrations, they're just not really connecting these days. So I tried everything, books on prayer, fasting. Nothing's really working.
We grew up in church. We've just seen over time pastors just kind of become outdated. We wanted to create a program to help pastors kind of become more relevant.
Help extend their reach.
Just, build their platform a little.
Throw a little juju on their beat.
Doug, how you doing, sir?
I'm okay.
What can we do for you?
Well, things have been kind of rough for me the past few months.
Yeah, church not going well, huh?
No, attendance is flat, tithing's low. I'm not really connecting with my congregation.
Well, Doug, bootcut khakis. That's not helping anything.
Did you guys do a mannequin challenge at your church?
Running Man Challenge.
Pokemon Go series.
Crying Jordan jokes.
Also, we knew you were coming in. We took a look at some of your sermon series. You had one recently called The Parables of Jesus.
Oh, I'm bored.
Already, we just optioned a sermon series called Screenshotted If Jesus Had a Snapchat.
We did. It helped literally no one, but he got so many followers from it.
You ever heard of Netflix and Chill?
Netflix and God's Will.
What about Walking Dead?
The Walking Bread.
Boom. I don't know, Finding Dory.
Finding Glory?
You got it, Doug. You're on it.
So you just take mainstream titles and you make them Christian. Is that even legal?
Hey, little phrase we like to say around here.
Trust the process.
You know what's back now these days? Little series, you might have heard of it. Gilmore Girls.
We already wrote a book called Fulfill More Girls.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
I don't understand why you would imitate a culture that we're supposed to be against.
Let's hop on your social media.
Let's
Let's take a
go.
look at that. There's a lot of things we can improve there. Doug, look, you posted an Instagram at a Kroger, okay?
Oh, bad news, Doug.
You don't shop at Kroger anymore, okay? Whole Foods and Trader Joe's is where you're gonna live.
Outdoor farmers markets photos do so well for your new brand. Doug, we gotta hook you up with a personal trainer. Are you a member of a gym?
It's real simple, okay? What we start with is the non-denominational multivitamin. That's just gonna give you a little bit more pep in your step, a little bit more energy on Sunday mornings. If you wanna go a step up from there, we have the Grow Shell Gummies. What that's gonna do for you is give a little more tone in the shoulders, make those sweaters fit a little tighter. Now, if you wanna go all the way, Furtick Food.
I don't know, guys. I just want to preach.
And you will, but first, hair and makeup. Doug, you're wearing a polo shirt tucked into your khakis.
Are you speaking at a golf pro shop?
Tiger Woods, you not? I'm gonna untuck it for you. We're gonna start there,
First
okay?
of all, the length of the shirt is a problem, okay?
Here's what we're gonna do. You see this line right here?
That's a swag pastor staple.
We call it the straight and narrow. We did it.
I just rededicated my life.
You look amazing.
Let's head over to your church. We got work to do.
We'll swag out that sanctuary, add a wood pallet background.
We'll have you planting satellite campuses in no time.
You know, good humor is funny because it's true. And so it's easy to watch something like that and sit there going, oh man, do I need to do those things? Do I need to change my sermon series titles? So, sermon series for this, or the title for this sermon series is True Lies. There's actually a movie called True Lies. I did not do that on purpose. And I don't recommend you watching that movie. But we're told repeatedly, you're not good enough. You need to be something different. You need to look different. You need to dress different. You need a different routine in your life. You need to be different. It is an awful lie. It is an absolutely awful lie. In fact, when people come to me, and I hear it regularly from young people, we've got the academy, the homeschool ministry, youth group, children's services on Sunday morning. When I hear from young people over and over and over again that they feel like they're not good enough, I just want to scream, stop it! Stop it. It's a lie. Don't believe that you're not good enough. But it's not just from young people that I hear it. I hear it from people all the time, all over the place. I don't feel like I'm good enough. I haven't done this. I hear it from people in that generation, the baby boomer generation, the greatest generation, the generation that's going away, going, I don't have enough to offer. I haven't experienced enough in my life. I haven't made enough money. I haven't had a great enough impact. I just want to go, stop it. Stop it. Because that is a lie. In fact, it is one of the most invasive, pervasive, awful lies in our world today that you are not good enough. So what is the truth? Well, the truth is, I am not good enough. You're probably looking at me now going, stop it! Well, the truth is, I am not good enough, but the part of it that makes it a 9 rather than a 6 is I was never meant to be good enough. See, we were never meant to be good enough, and that's okay. In fact, if we go back to the beginning of the Bible, we can see from the very beginning, what was the first thing that God said was not good? Can anybody tell me? The first thing that God said that was not good is that Adam was left alone. Before sin entered the world, Adam was all by himself, and God looked and said, that's not good. So what does that infer? Was Adam not good enough? Was Adam by himself not okay? Well, the answer actually is yes. Adam by himself was not good enough because Adam was one individual that was meant to be in community with others. So even before sin came into the world, we see that in and of ourselves, all alone, we were never meant to be full and complete and whole by ourselves. And so the idea that somehow I have to figure that out, that I have to be complete in myself, that I have to be good enough, is a lie from the very beginning of creation. We were never meant to be good enough, and that's okay. Well, then sin enters the world. That takes it to a whole nother level because there's all these things we're bombarded with over and over and over again. And yet Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians that being not good enough is okay. Will you open with me this morning to 2 Corinthians chapter 12? 2 Corinthians 12, verses 6 through 10. If you don't have a Bible, there's one on the back. I'd love to give you one. You can download one on any smart device that you may own. Go into any app store, just type in Bible. We use the Bible app. We have all of our notes. Everything that you see on the screen behind me can also be used or also be seen in that app, and you can use it after you leave here. Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, he says this, even if I should choose to boast, I would not be a fool because I would be speaking the truth. But I refrain so no one will think more of me than is warranted by what I do or say, or because these surpassingly great revelations. Therefore, in order to keep me from being conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Interesting part of this passage that I want to make sure that you catch is this at the very beginning. Even if I should choose to boast, I would not be a fool because I would be speaking the truth. Paul tells us in this passage, as he's talking about some things that had happened before, some great things that he had seen, some incredible things that he'd been a part of, that he could boast about these things. That in this situation, guess what? Paul was good enough. In fact, Paul just wasn't good enough. Paul was superior to every other person that probably had ever walked the face of the earth in this specific situation, which was that God had given him a specific revelation to tell the whole world exactly what God had said. I don't know about you, but my standard of good enough, that's pretty good. If God comes to you and gives you a revelation that you could share with the whole world, I'd have to assume by worldly standards that you would be good enough. And Paul makes the claim here that he's good enough. If I wanted to boast, I could, but I choose not to. But if I did, it would be telling the truth. Like, I'm pretty good at this. And he says, I don't want to do that. Why? Because being good enough, even if it's true, can lead to being arrogant and conceited. And so Paul says, even though I could have boasted, in order to keep me from being conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. So even though Paul had the ability to brag, in fact, many people write believing that Paul was the most arrogant of authors in the Bible, and some have even said that Paul might be the most arrogant of authors to ever walk the face of the earth. Because he claims something that most authors don't, that he had direct revelation from God, and in that revelation, he had the right to speak in ways that nobody else could speak. That sounds pretty arrogant. Or it could be extremely humble because Paul really was telling the truth. That he had something that nobody else could offer, that nobody else had been given. And in that, God understood that that could lead to something that would not be beneficial. Because what's worse than believing you're not okay, you're not good enough? Believing that you are okay and that you are good enough. Because the true danger comes when I get to that point where I think I've made it, where I think I know everything, where I think that I have the corner on truth, or that I am an expert in whatever area it may be. If you ever get to that point, watch out. And Paul, even though he might have been the premier individual in this area when it came to having spoke to God on Revelations, God knew that even Paul could have issues with thinking he was good enough. And so Paul was given a thorn in his side. What I think is extremely humble in this situation is that Paul understood what this thorn was. And he says here, I was given this thorn in order to keep me from becoming conceited. In order to keep me from becoming conceited. Paul knew where the true danger lay, in the idea of being good enough. And so he was given this thorn so he would remember not to become conceited. And so in that then, he said, where is actually my true strength? Not in this knowledge that I have that's superior, but rather in my weaknesses, because where does Jesus show up most? When I am weak. And so when we think about being good enough, we should be like Paul going, maybe at some point I will become good enough, but the danger is being good enough. I should never actually even aspire to that. I should understand the truth is that I am not good enough because it's there where the power of Christ truly shows up. Because Paul says, therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in my weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So where are you weak? As you sit here today, is there some place in your life that you sit there going, I am not good enough? But the devil has stepped in and there's a weakness in your life that he may have identified where instead of using it to show Christ's strength, he's used it and turned it on you and said, well, guess what? It's actually a 6. It's not a 9. Jesus can't show his power in you in that area. You're actually just weak. You're weak-minded. You're weak of strength. You're weak in whatever it may be because God says, no, hold on a sec. That's not a 6. That's a 9. Because you know that weakness I've given you? Guess what that weakness is for? That weakness is so I can show my strength through you. Because your weakness isn't about you, it's about me. Because when I use you in that area, the whole world will sit there going, woo, look what God has done. And so instead of sitting there believing the lie that we're not good enough, we should continue to pray, God, make me not good enough. Help me understand that I'm not good enough because then in those areas, God, you will show up and you will be seen and the world will stand in awe where in my weaknesses, you will be strong and you will make up for me. I'll tell you a couple of my weaknesses. First one is patience. Patience is a huge weakness of mine. And second is details. I am not good with details. I do not like getting into the dirt. I do not like getting into the nitty-gritty. I do not like that part of the process. And so I get impatient when all the details don't come together. And oftentimes I can look past the details because I want to keep moving because who really cares about the details? Come on, seriously. They're not that important. I've learned details are very important. And there are people out there that are extremely detailed, and I love you. I love you so much. I need you. Because you guys see the things that I don't. And if I desire to move forward, I can make a lot of mistakes because I don't always pay attention to the details. And one specific place in my life where that has shown up is in my desire to do home improvement projects. God has humbled me. This is a thorn in my side. I like doing crafty things. I like putting things together. I've learned primarily on my own. I've watched videos. I've had people come over and help. I've observed. I've done all sorts of things. And yet home improvement projects stretch me because I want to get them done. And I can get like really focused and really intense. And I'm like, let's go. Let's finish this. I got like one day. We're going to make it happen. If I don't get it done in that one day, like I get to a point where why didn't it get completed? But you know what happens when you rush through a project in one day? You miss the details. You miss the little things. They say measure twice, cut once. Yeah, I'm measuring and cutting, and then I'm like, I got to do it all over again. Or I put something together, and I get to this point, I forgot that I needed this, and I got to take it all back apart to get back to here so I can get here because I overlooked something. So I've learned to do a lot of my projects in white. Why do I use white? Because caulk covers a lot of stuff. Right? Get to a place in a project, you realize you got to go backwards, and it's white. I'm putting caulk on it. I'm moving forward, right? Caulk is a beautiful thing. I mean, it is something that is in my house regularly. I use it more than I should. I do everything in white. Well, here's what I realized. As I read this passage, as I've done home improvement projects, as I've used caulk to cover up all of my weaknesses, I've come to understand that Jesus is a lot like the caulk on my projects. Those areas that you look at that you're like, oh, that's not very good. Oh, man, I should have probably gone back and fixed that. You know what Jesus does? Jesus comes in and he goes, here, let me put some caulk on that. Let me cover that for you. And what I've come to find is that this is a beautiful thing because my projects don't actually look that bad when you stand way back here. That looks really good. Don't get any closer. Because you start getting up to it, you start seeing some of the weaknesses. You start seeing some of the lines. You see the fingerprint that got left within the caulk because I'm not patient, so I don't use the little caulk tool. I actually just use my finger. And then you touch it again, and then you touch it again, and you got a little ridge in there, and you're like, oh, but stand back here, looks just fine. How many of you feel that way about your life? How many feel that, man, don't get too close? Don't get too close, because if you get too close, you're going to see the ripples. You're going to see the edges, and yet God comes in and says, hey, you know what? I'm going to be the caulk to cover that. Invite people close in because it's not just this that Jesus does for us. He's not just your regular old caulk. He's like the heavy-duty caulk, right? He's not just this little teeny tiny little gun that can fix some of your problems. He comes in with the big guns. I tried to find one bigger than this at the store, but I couldn't. I think this is about as big as it gets. But he comes in with a big caulk gun with all sorts of stuff that can cover anything in your life, all of your weaknesses, all of your issues, all of the problems that you have. God comes in and says, guess what? That's actually where I'm strong. That's what I was made for. That's what I was meant to do. In those places where you're like, oh, it's just not quite good enough, Jesus steps in and covers all of that and says, look at what I have done. It is a beautiful picture. It's an amazing project. It's exactly the way that I have designed it. And he's not sitting there going, well, maybe I need to go back. Maybe I need to fix something. Maybe like the last 10 years of your life just need to be removed because you really screwed up. If you could go back to this date and start all over again, then we'd be good. That's not what God says. Because he steps in and says, where you blew it, where you screwed up, where you're sitting there going, I'm not good enough, I can fill that for you. I can change that for you. In fact, in that spot, that's where I'm at my best. See, if I didn't screw up, I don't even really know what caulk is for. I think to waterproof stuff or to do something, maybe to put around a sink. But man, I found many uses for this. In our lives, many of us, if we didn't screw up, we wouldn't know what God is for. What do I do with this? I don't need this. And God steps in and says, I want to be everything to you. Even in your successes, I want to be there for you. But I know that your successes might lead to a place where it's actually more dangerous than your weaknesses. And so I'm going to give you things in your life where you're not very strong. I love, Paul says he prayed for it to be taken away. You know how many times I've prayed for, oh, that's the piano. I'm sorry. Do they have black caulk? Can I just fill in it? I don't even know what I'm saying now. There have been times where I prayed, where I said, God, take this from me, where there's things like I don't want to be impatient. Like I want to be able to sit still and just allow God to work and just enjoy the moment and just be good where I'm at. And yet my personality is not wired that way. I prayed, Lord, take this from me. And he says, no, I'm not going to take it from you because you're going to do stupid stuff and you're going to learn to be humble. Oh. You're going to screw up and have to go back and I have to fix it. And that's exactly the way I've wired you because in those moments, I'll make up for it. I'll be strong for you. That's how Jesus is to us. So how are we then supposed to be to others? Well, guess what? We're supposed to be their caulk. 1 Peter 4, 7-8 says this, the end of all things is near. Therefore, be alert and of sober mind so that you may pray. Above all, love each other deeply because love covers over a multitude of sins. I really believe that verse tells us that we're supposed to be the caulk for others. What does it mean that love covers a multitude of sins? Well, it doesn't mean that our love atones for those sins. Jesus did that. It doesn't mean that we ignore sins, because the Bible very clearly says that we can't do that. But what it means is that when we love each other, we can move on from those sins. We can help each other forget those sins. And that together as a community, we can be what it is that Jesus wants us to be. So what if we were a community that embraced our weaknesses? That said, it's okay that I'm not okay. That I'm not good enough. That I don't live up to this worldly standard. Because none of us will ever be that way. The standard that we must try to be like is a standard that Jesus set for us, and that's what the author's intent was, that we would be like him over and over and over again, that every day we would wake up and that we would try to be like Jesus, that we would follow his way. And he says that in your weaknesses, that's where I'm most valuable. Well, guess what I've learned in my time in ministry? You know where I'm most valuable? When other people are weak. You know what I love my wife to do? I love when she comes to me and says, I need you. I need you. Not that she needs me because I can do some project for her or I'm tall and I can reach the top shelf in the kitchen. But when she comes and says, I need you. It's usually because she can't do it by herself. What if we were a community like that? That said, here's my weaknesses. I can't do this. Jesus, I need you to step in to make up where I fail. And I need you as a community to support me where I can't make it. What would that look like? I truly believe that we are a community that does that fairly well. But we live in a culture that tells us repeatedly we need to find a way to be good enough. We need to put stuff on social media. We need to put this persona on that shows the world, well, guess what? I have it all together. Well, that's a lie. You don't. None of you do. If you think you do, come talk to me. I'll tell you don't. But I'd love to be able to then be that community that says, I don't have it all together. I don't have all the answers. I know I'm not good enough. As we start doing that, maybe we'd see Jesus step into it. We'd see him pick up where we fail. And we then would be a community that in love, above all other things, we could move past some of those things and really see God work in incredible ways. So here's our challenge as we end today. We must embrace the fact that we're not good enough. Let Jesus be our caulk. And let's do that for others. A tangible way you can do that is in the fall, we're launching a care ministry. And we're looking for individuals that would be willing to come alongside other people one-on-one. Individuals that understand they're not good enough. I'm not looking for people that have it all together. I'm not looking for people to have all the answers because those people don't exist. We're looking for people that can love individuals, that can come alongside each other and say, hey, where you fail, maybe I can step in. Because there are people out there right now that are going, I need you. I need somebody. I need to be encouraged. I need to be told I'm good enough. And every so often, each one of us in our lives just needs a little encouragement. And sometimes that encouragement is just coming alongside and saying, hey, guess what? You don't need to be good enough. That's why we have a Savior. His name is Jesus. And he's going to cover up where we fail. So if you're interested in helping somebody along that lines, let us know. Let the church office know. Let one of the elders up here at the end of the service know. Because I truly want to be a community that understands it's in our weaknesses where Christ is strong. And that in those weaknesses, we can support each other and encourage each other and help each other and be a community that when the world looks at us, they go, what's wrong with them? And we can point to Christ and say, he's all we need. Will you pray with me? Lord, we thank you. We thank you this morning for the understanding that we are not good enough. That we are not ever going to be good enough. And yet that's okay, Lord, because it's in our weaknesses that we should boast. It's in our failures and the things that we don't do well, because in those places you show up and it's about you and not us. And so I pray, Lord, that we can be a community that understands that we will never be good enough, and that's okay. And yet that we will be a community that seeks after you because you are good enough. You are the standard. You are the one that steps in. You are the one that fixes all the problems. You are the caulk that covers up the messiness of our lives. Not that it goes away, not that it disappears, not that we don't still have to deal with it. But that you have said, I love you because of it. So Lord, I pray then that we are that community for others, that we are a place that when we see the messiness, when we see the ugliness, when we see that we are not good enough, that we will be a community that loves each other, that we deal with tough issues, that we step into the messiness, and that we can be the caulk for other people's lives, just like you are for us. Lord, we thank you so much for who you are. We thank you for your word. And Lord, I pray we continue to understand your intent as we live in this world, because it's not about us. It's not about anything we have done. It's about you and you alone and what you've done for us. We thank you, we praise you, we give it all to you. In Jesus' name, amen.